Hello again, and welcome back to my 2012 Halloween watch list. We're in the middle of the Franchise Fest, which is a little subsection of the watch list. Today we're talking about another set of sequels in the Halloween series. And once again, I have to forewarn you, there will be spoilers. Today we're talking about a movie that really caught me off guard when it came out back in 1998. I was a big fan of Scream when it came out, and a lot of similar movies like that. And if you really weren't into horror back then, like 1996, 97, then it would be hard to say that you would kind of understand where my love of movies like this come from. About 1996, when Scream came back, there was a resurgence of horror for the first time in many, many years. Halloween hadn't been around in a while, and when it was, it kind of left a bad taste in people's mouths. They just really were kind of over the series. Other franchises such as Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th had kind of went as far as they could, and people just kind of felt that the scariness from horror movies were gone. And there was just not a lot of horror movies going around that were super popular. Then when Scream came along, it completely changed. People started going to see more horror movies. People started getting excited about seeing older horror movies that were referenced in Scream. And it just put some life back into the genre. And I was still kind of riding horror high from 96 to 97, 98. When this came out, I was still heavily into that resurgence. I was renting and going to see things at the theater, basically almost everything that came out. I was so hungry for something new that I wasn't realizing that this genre itself was starting to become redundant. And when I'd heard that Kevin Williamson was involved, which is the guy that did the original Scream script, I was very excited. And I went to go see Halloween H2O twice at the theaters. The first time I saw it, I was so blown away by the ending that I kind of didn't know how to perceive what had happened. So I went back again to see it just to let it kind of set in. But this was back during the time when I was going to theaters a lot anyway. I was going at least, 2 or 3 times a week. It was during a time where I had summer school just at a certain way that I could get out of class early. 1 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody else would be there, and I could go sit down and watch maybe even 2 movies in the same day and be the only person in the theater. I really enjoyed that. It's like having your own gigantic big screen TV and getting to watch a movie for like $3. Halloween H2O comes out, and the big thing on this one is Jamie Lee Curtis is back for the first time since Halloween 2. Everything else kind of feels the same, but weird, you know what I mean? I don't know if this movie could have existed at all without Jamie Lee Curtis, because between this movie and the last movie, Donald Pleasance had passed away, and that was part of what kind of threw off everybody when Halloween 6 kind of seemed so disjointed. When they were reshooting little bits and pieces of scenes, they couldn't include Donald Pleasance, unfortunately. In this movie, we get this weird vibe that, where's Jamie Lee been, And then if you weren't really around during this time for them to explain this, because this was explained a lot, their intention here was to completely skip over Halloween 4 and 5 and 6. This was, as Halloween 7, was actually intended as a direct sequel to Halloween 2, which to me seemed insanely crazy because people are confused enough by the idea that Halloween 3 kind of doesn't have anything to do with them. Now you're saying Halloween 4, 5, and 6 don't have anything to do with this, and it's now becoming a chore to try to keep up with the lineage of this franchise. But if you were keeping up with Halloween, it's pretty easy to forget 4, 5, and 6 and just say, okay, 1, 2, H2O. Which, of course, Halloween H2O, Halloween 7, that stands for 20 years later. Because at this point, this was the 20th anniversary. It's hard to believe that Halloween 4 was the 10th anniversary, and then we've got this as the 20th. And I actually like this. I think the choice of actors were a little odd. It's definitely going to, as time goes on, seem more and more like they picked these actors during the 90s, it's going to just feel that way when you hear their names. We got people like Josh Hartnett, Michelle Williams, and LL Cool J, and also Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and in a little small part, Janet Leigh. That's what I enjoy about this the most, is that this movie here kind of tries to play homage to other horror movies in the way that Scream did to Halloween. Now Halloween turns around and goes back to Psycho. And if you know who Janet Leigh is, she is the famous murder victim from The Shower in Psycho. Well, of course, that's also Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. So it's very interesting the way that this movie is connected to the history of slashers. But it was awesome to see Janet Leigh. I had read that Janet Leigh was going to be in this before I watched it, and I'm a big fan of Psycho. And I didn't really recognize her because I hadn't seen her like outside of Psycho probably very much at all. Quite a bit of time had passed too. Like between this and that is almost 40 years. So when I saw her on the screen, it took me a while, and then I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's Janet Leigh. You know, she's aged, of course, since 1960. The other thing that's really interesting is how much detail they went into to pay homage to Psycho with Janet Leigh. Janet Leigh's character has very few lines, and she's just kind of there, but it's the music score that you'll recognize from Psycho. It's the car that they give her when she gets ready to leave. She's driving a car like she had in the movie. I think it's the one that is actually just like pushed into the lake, which I honestly can't say if it's the same color because, of course, Psycho's in black and white. But I'm assuming that's, you know, they went into that much detail. It's probably the exact same color too. But it's very cool to see that. I enjoy it. Let me set up the story here real quick because I've already gone on a long time about Halloween 7. The big thing on this one is that Jamie Lee Curtis has been in hiding this whole time. She is using a different kind of identity than she had as Laurie Strode. She is working at the school and she has a son. And also you can see that she's really affected psychologically by the history of what had happened to her. And even though she puts on a big smile every time she's out and about, internally she's working with those demons every day. It doesn't really explain exactly why. Maybe it's the anniversary itself, but Michael Myers does just decide to head back. Now, it does show that the way he tracked her down was through a nurse or somebody. I think it was maybe somebody that was taking care of Dr. Loomis before he passed away. And he steals the records from her house. That's kind of how the movie opens. But it doesn't really explain where he's been in between these times, because in the course of this movie's history and connection with Halloween 2, it's been exactly 20 years since he's done anything. But having found the records to Laurie Strode and her new name, or however he figures out from this paperwork that where she lives, he goes to this city, and the whole time you're not really for sure if he's there or he's not, because a big part of it is Jamie Lee Curtis like sees things a lot, and you can never really tell if she's really seeing something. The movies in Halloween series kind of feel that way anyway. Sometimes you'll slightly see Michael Myers, and the character will turn back, and they'll be gone. Well, Jamie Lee Curtis kind of experiences that in real life all the time without Michael Myers being there at all. Pretty crazy. When he does return, there's a school where she is working at and where her son, the Josh Hartnett character, is attending. And that school has a big camping trip, some kind of like thing set up where they're all leaving, and Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't let her son go. And him and his friends decide they're going to find a way to all stay together and throw this big Halloween party while the trip is gone and nobody's at the school. Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, she stays behind. She doesn't go. And it's then that this all unfolds with all the other characters that are the main characters staying in this private school by themselves. It's pretty typical at that point. The only thing I can say that's really weird about this one is it's not super gory. Their thing wasn't going for gore, but it does have a new veracity to the killer. You can kind of see the way Scream or a movie like that kind of springboard for movies like this, and the way they look and the way they feel. The weird one is that this is some of the first time I've seen where, like, when people get repeatedly stabbed, like, it is intense. The force for which Michael Myers uses is unbelievably crazy. This movie's also noted, I'll throw this in there real quick, that his mask looks a little different. Apparently they had issues with the rights to the original mask and the way it looked. And instead of dealing with those rights, they just opted to change the look of the mask, which kind of didn't work. Apparently they redid this mask like, I think 3 different times during the course of this movie, and there is actually a CG version of this mask in a few parts. I've looked for it before and I didn't really catch it, but now that I know it's there, it's going to bug me to death. But apparently there was one version of the mask that screened really bad. And then there was another version of the mask that looked maybe what they thought a little bit too close to the mask they didn't have the rights to. And then there was another mask that was somewhere in between those 2 masks, because they'd already shot so many scenes that they really couldn't change the mask. So there are some scenes where there's a CGI mask placed over Michael Myers' mask. It's insane. That kind of thing just detracts for me. I wish I didn't know all that. But as a whole, the big part on this one, I'm going to try to wrap this up because the next one I have very little to say about. The big thing on this one is that at the end, it gives a very, very final fitting ending for Jamie Lee Curtis to finish off Michael Myers. That's big. It's not just like, Halloween 1 where she like stabs him in the eye and then, like they shoot him. Halloween 2, he gets burned. This one, there was not going to be any question what was going to happen, and Jamie Lee Curtis literally chops his head off with an axe. And it's very jarring. The music is very intense, and all of a sudden it's just like, boom, it's abrupt. And it makes you wonder, you're just like, oh my gosh, are they really going to end this series like this? Because how do you come back from that? It's very intense, and I enjoyed it. The ending of this shocked me so much I wanted to see it again just because I couldn't believe that's how it ended. And I thought to myself, man, Jamie Lee Curtis has really, her character Laurie Strode's been pushed to the edge. I mean, maybe Laurie Strode's going to go crazy in the next movie. But this is the actual Halloween H2O. I don't think it holds up as well as I would have liked over the years, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. One of the things that I enjoyed about it the most is that, of course, like I said, it's very well made. I think the cast is kind of meh, and I think the story is just kind of weird, but it does try very hard to feel true to the franchise. If you saw part like 6 and was kind of questioning what was going on there, this is going back to the roots of Halloween, which is kind of what the series needed. Okay, now we're moving on. I'm trying to keep this one brief because I talked so much about Halloween H2O, but I was impressed by that movie originally, but this one I was not. This is Halloween Resurrection, which is officially Halloween 8. So 4 years later this came out, and I remember thinking, as soon as I heard this, I was like, I don't even want to see that. I saw that Busta Rhymes was in it and a few other things, and I was like, this just seems like... they're going back to where they were before, which is they're just cashing in the name Halloween. And it does feel like that to a certain degree. There's some interesting stuff going on in this movie from afar, like if you just read the ideas. But when you get down to the execution of it, it's not as interesting as what you'd hope. Jamie Lee Curtis surprisingly does come back from this. I have no idea how much money she got paid to do this, but it must have been a lot because... I can't believe she came back for this. When you see this movie, the first thing you're going to ask yourself is, now, how are they going to bring back Michael Myers? You can pay Jamie Lee Curtis a whole bunch of money and you can get Laurie Strode back, but we chopped Michael Myers' head off in the last movie. What are we going to do in the next movie? Well, interesting as it is, they have that all worked out. That's probably my favorite part of this. The most interesting part is the very beginning and the very end. The very beginning, they go back and explain that there was a scene in 7 where Michael Myers had fallen, and they thought he was dead. He'd fallen off this thing and had been shot and everything else. And basically they were saying that he was, dead. Well, between that time and the actual ending where he was confronting Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie, he had switched his costume out with a paramedic. And as crazy as that seems, the paramedic, he didn't know what was going on. He had Michael Myers' mask on, and they changed clothes. It just seems all very strange that Michael Myers, this like faceless, nameless killer kind of person, is going around switching clothes with people. It just seems very like Benny Hill. But when he does switch clothing with this person, he puts them in the body bag, and they're inside the vehicle when it crashes. And Jamie Lee Curtis's character gets to the point where she's confronted by Michael, what she thinks is Michael, and he doesn't say anything. To me, the odd part is they choose to not question why this guy doesn't try to pull his mask off to show that he can't talk. It's very odd. And that's when she cuts his head off. Come to find out, it's not Michael Myers. It doesn't question him waving his hand saying, no, 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 no. He's not doing these motions to say, don't, hit me with an axe. Instead, he's reaching towards her, and he's just acting very Michael Myers-like, but in a weird way. To me, that's an odd choice, because it's going to make you question whether or not that's believable that another person was switched out with the person that got their head cut off. But the movie opens explaining all that. They take the mask off. The guy's face that's underneath there is the guy that, of course, was the medical person. And then you get kind of a flash forward. Jamie Lee Curtis is in a mental hospital. Her hair's grown out really long, and it just looks like she's just weathered. She looks horrible. And that's kind of the explanation is for everything she did. She thought she killed Michael Myers, and all she really did was kill this innocent man. And that to me is probably the most interesting part of this movie. It doesn't get much more interesting than that, because after that she is confronted by Michael Myers. He does show up at the hospital, and then you get kind of like this weird, is it going to be like Halloween 2 kind of thing again? And surprisingly, she's very prepared. That's the part that surprised me the most. Is it's like Jamie Lee Curtis has been sitting in this hospital this whole time, not taking her medicine, being prepared to face down, Michael Myers again. She just never would give up on the idea that, he's going to come back. And no matter what anybody thinks of her at the hospital, she is, just catatonic for a reason. It's not just because she's messed up. I mean, she is mentally preparing herself for Michael. She does confront him, and oddly enough, it ends up with her dying right at the beginning of the movie. And like I said, spoilers. They kill off Jamie Lee Curtis, which I'm sure was part of her contract. The idea was, yes, I will return if you will kill me off so that I can never return, which doesn't feel truthful to the series. For everything that she went through, it seems kind of like they just finish her off. I'm sure that's the only way they could work that out to even have, her character in the movie at all. But the next part of the movie is a very bland, very early 2000s kind of thing where there's this internet web show that's shooting live from the location of Michael Myers. Michael Myers does return. I don't even have to get into this stuff because it's all very cliche. The actors that they use and stuff are kind of just playing it up from a Hollywood standpoint. It doesn't feel like a true slasher. I like some of the people that are in this. I just don't really dig this type of movie, and I don't think it's necessarily where the franchise was headed originally, and it's just the times that it was made in. But if there's something that they've got to do to kill off the Halloween series, this did a good job, even though at the end they don't actually show Michael Myers dead. A lot of the scenes in this are kind of interesting, but once you watch them, you're just like, yeah. I like the idea that the people watching it on the web cams and stuff like that on their computers are giving information to the people at the location, telling them where he's at and stuff like that. That's kind of interesting, but at the same time, it's just, very modern, and it's showing technology, versus Michael Myers, which I don't really like that whole idea. It just kind of seems weird. But at the end, Michael Myers once again is all beat up, banged up. He's dead. He goes to the morgue and his eyes open. And that's kind of how it ends. And of course, who knows if that's how it ends or not, because they didn't do a continuation of that series once he did die. So as sad as it is that that franchise kind of ends on a downer note, it actually has a really high note at the end, and that's it. It's over with. So I will leave it at that, and when we come back, we will talk about the restart of the franchise, which was Halloween Rob Zombie style. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We will continue on with Franchise Fest tomorrow. I'll see you then. All right.